So lesson 4 is for today with our 2 reading materials. And then lesson 5, I think I will just tackle one. And then, of course, another 2 reading materials. Lesson 5 has 2 items, 5.1 and 5.2. Na sabtan to,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so by the way, sa lesson 4, natay reading material because natay evaluation sa last item for water engineering. So, but sa transportation, kato sa lesson 5, wala pa ko nabutang. Just for lesson 4 so that you can prepare at least for Tuesday next week. Okay, so it's still a group work. So kindly make sure na each group member can tackle the required exercise for the class. Sige, Dar, mag-start na ta sa class and then malihog lang ko sa Dar, recording.
Okay, ma'am. Ay, ito ata mag-pray.
Okay. We will start with a prayer. How people will use water in terms of supply and demand, and how at least they will save water. So that's conservation. The other side, when we talk about water protection, it will mean when we have resources of water in the natural environment, in our ecosystem, then we have at least to protect water so that we can still recharge, or nature can still recharge and can still supply us with the natural resource of water. Kaya ang atong natural environment naman siya discharge and recharge. Ang discharge is when it will flow from our ecosystem and that will be utilized maybe by humans, flora, and fauna. And yet, because there's a natural cycle of things, ang ato gyapon na deplete na water, ma-recharge ra gyapon sa environment. It will come into a form sa water cycle nato sa environment. It will come into a form of our precipitation. So, and then becomes our water resource na podayon. Overarching din, Ana, is that it's a cycle of keeping water in a good way, no? And yet, because this is a natural resource, water should be protected. Now, in terms of water management, it is now built environment application because water management would require human intervention in terms of how you will conserve and protect water. So, overarching management is really for our mission as a in the profession of civil engineers to ensure that water in terms of supply and demand by people, especially sa urban development or sa development sa tao, we should at least have a degree of conservation and protection of our resource. So we go back to the idea that when we have urban environment, natay daghan kay nga mga climate change impacts. Some impacts are related to also human impacts, no, such as population explosion, that's human impact. Ang mga urban disaster is a natural impact because of climate change. Ang urban sprawl because of human impact. And then road safety and security issues, it's related to human impacts, which are related also to human crimes. And then road and motorization issue, which create pollution impacts, are actually based on human activities. And of course, urbanization and land use issue, which is related to human development, especially sa urban cities and localities or metropolis. Considering these impacts, we know fully that some of them are climate change related impacts, but most of which are actually human impacts in relation to the environment. So we remember or we recall the pillars of sustainability. Ningunta ang sustainability, or by definition, sustainability has 3 pillars, namely social, environmental, and economic. And before we extend to the idea that sustainability efforts sa atong environment, social, and economic application should have a very good or base foundation, which is actually governance and allocations of resources, particularly sa financial aspect of how we manage our money and our effort in terms of governing everything really in relation to sustainability. So on the right side, we can see therefore sustainable development in terms of consideration for different impacts na po siya conflict, no? So ang conflict is when we're not able to see that there are certain areas where ang usahay, ang tao, dili magkasinabot in terms sa ilang tumo, no? So one of that impact is the equity. When we say equal for all, because there's a degree of social balance in sense, no? So kailangan ang distribution sa atong service in terms of sustainability na ay equal distribution so that na siya justice. In a way, ma-reduce na to ang impact or conflict in relation to property, maybe sa usa ka yuta, sa material nga naa sa atong environment or nasa atong built environment. The other one is when we are into development and malimtan nato nga human needs are prioritized over, or ang environmental needs is prioritized over, no, sa social development or economic development. On the other side, lantaw na to nga economic has also interest in terms of how we manage our wealth, our production and resource. But again, it should have been nga walay conflict in terms of resource management and property management so that at least ang effort na to tanan is really sustainable. And of course, the last part is the environment, which is our ecology. The interest of those non-human species, like flora and fauna and the ecosystem as a whole is important element of our sustainability concept. So again, at this point in time, ang atong human development should not compromise environmental concern and our economic development in terms of how we manage our resources should not compromise our environmental concern. Okay. So if we go back to our natural environment, ang atong environment has a natural cycle, no? So we mentioned ganina, there's a natural cycle of things in our environment wherein na siya'y gitawag og a recharge and depletion process. So kung yung tag-recharge is like the rebirth of something, and then ang iyang discharge is ang atong pag-use or consumption sa iya. So the natural environmental cycles are actually energy flows which might be one directional or more than a path system. And usually the cycle is based on the nutrient cycle, which is a closed system based on biotic, abiotic, and biotic cycle. So ang mga biotic katong ecosystem, ang abiotic is human. So it's a cycle of the usage of this item, the nutrient cycle, sa atong flora and fauna, and then sa human, and balik na po sa flora and fauna. That's a natural cycle. So there is a degree of growth in terms of sorry na lang sa term sa metabolism, kaya di ko familiar, nakalimot na ko. But it's more on, when we have nutrients, it creates growth for an organism, no? So na siyang energy nga kailangan niya energy nga kailangan niya i-replenish kung na-exhaust niya. So the moment nga kailangan i-replenish ang usa ka nutrient kay na-deplete na, that's actually energy required for growth of an organism. So the reason why gagamit ta, consume ta, is because ang mga organism will need that metabolic state of requirement para sila mag-create sa ilang energy sa ilang sustenance, no? Sa ilang, maybe sa human, kay sa iyang body, kay mulihok man siya, so ma-deplete yung energy. So kailangan siya mukaon. And kung mukaon siya, kailangan siya makuha sa iyang environment, sa resource na iyang need sa iyang body. So that is a nutrient cycle of things in terms of biotic, abiotic, and biotic system. So because nutrient is in the environment and energy is also free in the environment, the tendency is there is a natural cycle of things based on the need for the ecosystem which has life, the earth, which is the geo, and the chemical compositions which is related to the cycle and the cycle circulation as well. So ang chemical composition can be nitrogen, carbon, sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen. These are all in our environment, and yet because na ako'y cycle siya, so naay mga movement ani sa chemicals sa atong environment nag-create og energy and everything that is needed by the ecosystem. So an example of the nutrient cycle and transfer is from one source to another is when we talk about the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the lithosphere, and the biosphere, which is our ecosystem subdivisions of layers. So the atmosphere has the gas. Okay, gas is nitrogen, and then you have oxygen, and then carbon dioxide. So the compositions are actually atmospheric gases. And then sa water naman, hydrosphere. So we have marine bodies, we have glacial and ice caps, and then the flora and fauna, which has actually water in itself, no? Plants have its own water, animals has water, so kanya siya. And then lithosphere is the upper mantle and crust. Those are the items which has the materials sa soil, sa mga rocks, mga volcano, tanami sila as are part of the upper mantle or crust sa atong environment. And then of course, mga sublayers would niya, which is a resource material for us, no? Raw material for, let's say, sa mining, let's say sa atong pagtanom, agriculture, those are related sa lithosphere. And then the biosphere is a biotic environment. So it's a combination of the lithosphere, hydrosphere, and the atmosphere. So ang composition sa biosphere is katanan dayon tanan nga nagpuyo ana. So those are the abiotic, and then biotic, kitang humans, flora and fauna, because overarching sa biosphere, we are part of the entirety of the atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere. Kita ang nag-benefit sa atong biosphere system. So what are the cycles then? The cycles are basically gaseous in form or sedimentary. So gaseous kay katong mga nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, and the water cycle that we have. And ang sedimentary nga cycles are those na nag-transfer lang. For example, in the lithosphere, that as say phosphorus and sulfur. Nganong importante ni siya, ma'am? Importante masabtan nga gikan aning idea sa biosphere and the geo of the earth, natay chemicals in the environment that supports our natural cycles of things. And because of that, kailangan nato ma-identify para masabtan pud nato unsa ilang role sa nutrient cycle nga ginid sa atong human body, sa flora and fauna sa environment, o tanan nga organism nga gaka-survive lang tungod ani nila nga cycle of the nutrients that we need, no? An example is an animal who eats grass, and that grass is sa iyang digestive system kay ma-transfer into a mechanism that will give energy to the animal, and then mag-create siya metabolism for the animal to be dynamic. But at the end of the day, kana nga sa iyang digestive system will become a refuse nga iyang igawa sa iyang body after ma-exhaust ang energy, and kana nga refuse mabalik niya sa environment. Ang environment makinabang anang iyang refuse, no? The organisms, the bacteria and so forth will decompose that refuse of the animal to go so that it will go back to the environment again and become again the chemical composition of the earth or our biosphere. Okay, so if we look at then atong systems environment natin nitrogen cycle, natin carbon cycle, and the nitrogen cycle again sa dimension is ma-exhaust siya sa organism, and pag ma-refuse na sa iyang body after makuha niyang energy, mabalik ra gyapon sa environment. Now, ang carbon cycle is the same, no? Carbon is partly based on human respiration, human emissions. Kung nag-abiotic ta, nagsunog ta, it's carbon, no? Sa mga animals, ang nilang mga singot and respiration, even sa humans, no? Mag-exhaust man ta o gas, carbon, and sa trees, and those things will go back to the environment and become the natural cycle of carbon. Phosphorus is the same. Kung ay mga burning, for example, volcanic phosphorus are generated and becomes a material for all other items in the biosphere. So mahimo siya kung mag-ulan, manaog ragyapon siya as phosphorus nga material na mahimong part sa atong biosphere. So mahimo siyang part sa atong yuta or sa atong land. Then it becomes again a natural cycle of the nutrients. And then of course sa human side, kung maggamit ta sa atong mga activities sa human, usually part of that activity sa agriculture, sa mga animals, ilang refuse ana is phosphorus, and some of which will go back to the environment again based on the nutrient cycle. And then we have sulfur again. Sulfur is the same sa phosphorus, no? It's almost It's the same pattern but different lang ang imuhang nutrient cycle nga istoryahan og ang chemical composition. But again, the same na siya. Activities of human, burning and whatnot, and even our natural environment, flora and fauna will secrete, no, exhaust sulfates, and that sulfates become parts of our environment. And of course, ang oxygen cycle is the same. Oxygen cycle are emitted by plants and animals and human activities, and this becomes a natural cycle of the environment. And so is water. So water, ang pinaka-importante na discussion today is related yapon ani nga mga natural cycle. But ang form niya is dili gas or nutrient item, but it's more on a fluid item which is called water. So again, water are depleted over time, but then ato man siyang i-exhaust, ilabay sa environment balik, and supposedly in the natural cycle of things, it will go back as water in our environment. The problem lang with human activities is sometimes kaning mga cycles sa atong environment, the natural cycles of nitrogen, carbon, sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen, and water cycle are sometimes exhausted too much nga atong mismong environment, dili siya ka-recharge. Anong di man siya ka-recharge, ma'am? Kaya usahay, grabe ang consumption sa human. And ang ending, mag-deplete nimo siya, di siya mabalik o isakto. So, dili maka-recharge ang natural cycles sa atong environment or ecosystem. The other one is, kung daghan na po kay ang refuse niya, daghan na ang nalabay, nga ang environment mismo, dili siya ka-maintain sa balance, no? So, for example, sa water, water has a natural balance, no? Ang likan sa mga sayuta nga na-infiltrate, moadto siya sa surface water, no? And that surface water will be evaporated. Evaporation will create the needed clouds formation for precipitation, and then precipitation balik na po siya sa land. But ang problem is when so much area, sa area wala siya natural cycle nga klaro kay yung water kay nasobraan ka deplete, no? Tendency is walay tubig nga mabalik sa iyahang atmosphere. So isolated cases na yung mga area across the globe nga maka-experience siya famine, maka-experience siya og desertification, o maka-experience siya nga wala siya tubig sa iyang environment because ang iyang mismong land area cannot support holding water. Na holding water and filtered water will become part of your exhaust for surface water or groundwater discharge. Ang groundwater naman sa ilalim, pero kung ang land mismo di siya ka-hold of water, wala kay recharge sa groundwater. And kung wala kay recharge sa groundwater, wala pag kay water over land nga pwede mag-filtrate paingon sa water surface, wala kay water surface nga ma-expect. And kung wala kay water surface nga ma-expect, wala kay expected evaporation cycle towards precipitation and back to the ecosystem. So that's the problem then with climate change. In some areas, wala availability of this support system because human intervention, giguba kayo ang land, walay trees nga mag-help sa infiltration process, ang groundwater na deplete kay giwell na tanan, gibangag na para lang sa human consumption of potable fresh water, and therefore pagtupod sa water surface, hugaw kayo ang water surface na puno sa garbage and waste where water you cannot expect water in pure form to evaporate immediately kung naa siya contamination. So that's the reason nga ang water cycle is depleted. It's the same for all cycles of the nutrients in our environment. If we do not help in that cycle, we also expect impacts that adversely affect us human, the flora and fauna of the ecosystem. So therefore, what are the sustainability considerations for water? First one is supply and demand related. Sustainable water infrastructure. So we place collection and distribution of system, sabi na sa humans, flora and fauna nga need, we place infrastructure that collects, treats, and delivers water-related services so that these services will help humans consume on a greater balance and then return it to the environment. The other one is sustainable water sector system. So that's water balance in sense, no? Sustaining all aspect of utilities, paggamit o ang sistema sa pagkuha sa sa tubig ug ang paghatag sa serbisyo sa tubig. Kailangan siya sustainable. The third one is sustainable community. So water management na pod ni siya. So promoting the role of water services in furthering the broad goals of the community, especially kung urban. And then of course, appeal na ana ang conservation, protection, and the entirety the management of water. So kung tanaw nimo sa right, that is actually the pyramid of the importance of how systems has to be undertaken in terms of sustainable efforts para sa atong water engineering, no? First one, magbutang ta sa engineering plans, designs, and systems, and then making the system sustainable so that at the end of the line, atong community becomes sustainable in itself. Okay, so ang example na ko ani is ang mga infrastructure, for example, sa pipeline of water. We make sure that our pipeline applications will be a very good system so that walay leakage, walay wastage and all. And mahatod na to ang serbisyo sa tao so that ang tao mismo makuha niya iyang immediate need and then mabalik po niya sa iyang environment. Okay, so sustainability consideration then is actually related to the infrastructure and then ang provider, kung kisay mag-manage sa water, and kinsa ang user. So it's related to supply and demand. So ang overarching din ang pyramid of looking at things is number one, it should be accessible para sa tanan ang tubig, no? Katong nanginahanglan tagaan, dili lang ang human, no? Pati ang imuhang immediate needs sa imong agriculture para sa imong pananom, sa imong food supply, sa imong pa-protect sa environment para naata kayo water recharge area, especially sa mga watershed areas, no? So equitable for all ang access and therefore ang cost implication ana is shared pud ang cost to maintain these things. The other one is resource conservation. So ang atong resource is water, so ato siya i-conserve, ato siyang i-save, no? So that there's recharge in the environment. And in fact, kung apatay gastuan ana, let's say sa government, to protect natural resource, usahay mag-spend ang government just to make sure nga kana nga resource ma-maintain. So protection of land, protection of forests and agricultural areas are given priority by the government through budgets so that resource conservation will be managed and maintained. And of course, efficient supply so that dili ta mag-waste, no? Walay mausik. Kaya kung mausik, masayang lang atong effort. So there has to be resource, supply and demand management. Okay. So the balance then is looking at the item in relation to pollution. So nasa ubos ang red item, no? We know that when there is abundance of water supply, especially sa fresh water. Ang fresh water rabi nato ang source niya kay groundwater o kanang mga exit sa groundwater. Example sa exit sa groundwater kay ng mga atabay wells, no? Pagbangag nimo na din tubig, wala ka kabalo nga fresh water na from underground water reserve. Second is kung naay mga exhaust line, no? Streams, brooks, kanang sa Bisaya patubod, no? Kana naay mga bakilid na siya motubod nga tubig. Those are actually discharge water from underground water nga reservoir kay kung mapuno na kay ang reservoir sa underground, naman na siya mga point nga maka-exit siya. Sometimes underground river are tributaries of fresh water, no, from our natural reserves sa groundwater. So those are fresh water. So kung fresh water siya, we have to ensure that these ones are reserved, protected, kay para dili ma-contaminate. And therefore, we have to look at kung naa siya water pollution management of the system. So for example, sa Cagayan de Oro, atong elevation is lower compared sa Bukidnon area, and we are almost level to the elevation of the sea sa atong Bay. So therefore, kita man ang ubos, expected nga wala kay tay groundwater, no? But ang atong recharge, kung naman tay groundwater, ang nagtabang sa ato sa groundwater nato nga recharge is actually ang area sa Bukidnon. Kasi siya man ang higher elevation and naa pa man siya forest reserve area. And so expected na kay groundwater over time sa Cagayan because na may support system from other elevated area. So kung napoy other elevated area, it has to be nga naa kay watershed nga i-protect so that ang watershed will support or hold groundwater, and that groundwater will be protected over time. So the balance is when human needs water, especially fresh water, it should be nga ang supply will be balanced by demand, especially in terms of sustainable effort, effective nga system, efficient nga pag-supply para sa mga needs sa tao or sa atong mga flora and fauna. So for supply, we have to put in place in terms of management, policy and regulation sa atong mga water supply. So kung naatay river, dili ingon nga tanan i-divert ang tubig sa river sa tanan na mulupyo. Dili nay control sa atong river water para ang katong mag-need is para sa tanan equitable. So naatay Office of the Government which will regulate the water supply of our ecosystem sa mga river, sa mga reservoir, sa groundwater, sa mga streams on brook. Ang mga uban areas like mga munisipyo, provincial office, napod na sila policy in terms of protecting natural water supply. No? And then water storage. Water storage is kung naay need gid ang community, so naatay community water system para sa atong mga tao. So that's storage of water. So human reservoir, meaning to say man-made reservoir nga gihimo sa tao, is for water supply sa community. For example, sa water district nato, no, naaman tay reservoir gi-create gikan sa river para makasupply tag water sa entire Cagayan. And that water system from the river mo undergo na siya og facility where will have, before siya ma-distribute ang water, na siya degree of filtration process and i-process mo na ang water para siya magamit sa human, no? So from the river to sa reservoir nag-create sa water district, and then ang water district mag-create sa iyang process and then manage the water so that it can be distributed to the community. The other one is interbasin transfer. So mo tong example ganina nga ang atong groundwater under the earth is actually a reserve water nga fresh supply. So that is interbasin because wala na siya boundary, no? Mo flow ra man gid ang tubig ko asay higher elevation towards lower elevation. So makaingon jud ko na from some researches ang atong supply sa groundwater sa Cagayan de Oro is from actually the reservoir from the basins of Bukidnon and upper elevation areas sa Cagayan River. So that's the reason nga mga forest reserve areas sa upper Bukidnon and upper Cagayan are actually protected by the government so that dili ma-deplete ang water sa atong river, dili ma-deplete ang water sa atong groundwater sa Cagayan o sa Bukidnon. And then we have alternative water resources. So alternative water resources for some areas and other countries kay magkuha sila tubig sa dagat and then i-desalinate nila, so kuhaon ang asin para ang tubig pag-recycle ang water nila ilang i-undergo og cycle para ma-desalinate, mawala ang asin, and ang ma-retain nga water or na recycled nga water becomes water for domestic and potable use. So that's alternative water. Kaya wala sila fresh water, wala sila groundwater reservoir siguro and depleted. So they make use of seawater or open water from oceans and whatnot. So that is an example of alternative water resources. And then of course the other one is water reuse, no? Sa atong supply of water, naman tayo nagamit, no? Naglimpyo ta sa balay and everything. So domestic water can be recycled. Ngayon, kung i-reuse nimo siya, pwede siya gitawag na to brown water or gray water, no? Those are colored waters because gikan siya sa na-exit siya gikan sa usa ka process. For example, mga gihuga sa lababo, sa mga plato and everything, that could be used as brown water or gray water, and then kanang gikan pud sa banyo, dili nang sa toilet, no, kana lang sa banyo nang sa paglimpyo-limpyo. So those things can be collected to become gray water or brown water, and then can be reused to some degree, maybe further end of the line, pwede siya gamiton para ibubo sa mga bulak, para gamiton kung na ay storage of water para kung naay sunog, or gamiton siya for other purposes nga recycled siya nga water. And then the last one is ang mga treatment facility and technology for water, because of course atong water sa environment ang uban ana dili gid siya fresh water, no? So it has to undergo a treatment facility para lagi sa water district before siya ma-dispose and ma-distribute for human consumption, may it be for potable water nga mainom or domestic water nga gamiton sa mga industrial o mga household para sa ilang paglimpyo or pag-process. Okay, so that is supply. And ang demand is nagyapoy policy and regulations, because ang water naa siya gitawag og rights and trading. Napod siya gitawag og pricing. Now, rights and trading and pricing are almost related to economic value. So, naiubang country nga walay tubig, so ginapalit ang tubig, no? Napoy mga areas na naay water rights. For example, example lang niya, naay place sa let's say sa US. I think sa US mo to example. So, ang example is sa US nga naay isa ka property owner, wala siya kabalo nga ding land is tubigon, no? Tubigon meaning taas kayo ang water or groundwater. And then kaiyaman ang land, pag mag-extract siya tubig, dako ka iyang volume ma-extract from groundwater. So kana siya gipaligya din niya iyahang land para sa domestic use of human consumption. So let's say COW dito siya, no? Water district sa ila sa US na. Kita nila nga na isa ka tao nagbaligya sa tubig because ang iyang land is sitting on a watershed area, no? So swerte kay siya kay pagbangag nimo sa iyang gamay lang sa iyang groundwater, sa iyang yuta, kay makakita din mo tubod na din ang tubig. So that becomes freshwater resource. Nga naman na siya nahimong rights. Nahimong rights kay number 1, siya may tag-iya. Number 2 is kailangan man nimo ihatag para sa community. So pwede nimo siya ibaligya sa local government para ang local government mo take over sa imong land, and then sila mag-extract of water. Because after all, ang groundwater man dito ka predict asa siya mo gawas, asa siya dapit kataas, unless magbangag ta everywhere og atabay, no? Then kabalo ka mo ning groundwater level diri. But that's not always done, no? That's not sustainable. So we only drill water when we know asa dapit. Kadi pa to pwede magbangag everywhere. So katong ako example lang is that ang person nakabantay siya nga ang iya ding area is very low kayo ground level, and then in fact kung magbangag lang siya gamay, it is sitting actually on a groundwater discharge area. So that's the reason nga tubigon ang iyang area, iyang yuta. And pwede niya ibaligya para magamit sa government para sa distribution of water sa mga tao. So that's a degree of water rights. Now, the other one sa water rights is when we have a huge land surface. For example, sa river, no? A river is not owned by anybody, kaya it's actually across all areas. So, ang water rights is nasa government. Kaya ang river, ang dagat, ang suba is iyahang panag-iya. So, anybody nga maingon niya, ako ni nga property, ako ni nga tubig, that's wrong because it's a common good to everyone. And that's the reason nga to some degree, kung mag-share ang usa ko locality, let's say, atong share sa water sa Cagayan is Bukidnon area. So magkasinabot dahil ang municipality sa Bukidnon o sa Cagayan, how they will address water or protection and management of the river so that ang water ma-maintain, ma-preserve, and ma-protect. The other one is conservation. So I made mention that conservation is really efforts to save water. So everyone is actually required that when we demand water, kung naginhanglan ta sa tubig, kailangan nato i-conserve atong tubig. So sa panimalay, when we have water from the faucet, we need to allocate water appropriately to make it sustainable. We have to conserve water. So for example, sa ako, if I wash my plates and all, ang first na water from washing will be used for gardening. And ang second na water usage para sa rinsing of sabon and whatnot will be recycled for cleaning areas sa garden, cleaning kanang mga concrete areas nga hugaw, so limpyo, or basurahan, limpyuhan through the gray water. And then of course, ang third nga rin sink kanang panghugas na gid sa limpyo sa imong mga gamit sa plato, that could be used for the toilet, no, sa imong mga tiles or sa imong toilet pagwash. So that's actually conservation effort. There's a lot of effort that could be done in the household just to preserve water, including ana is kung may ulan, ang atong downspout from the gutter towards the downspout will actually help collect rainwater, no? So that's called as rainwater catchment. So rainwater collected over time is part of a conservation effort for us humans to really recycle water and then reuse water for certain purposes. And then of course, the other end of the line that we have to look at sa engineering application is water use efficiency or consumption efficiency, water reuse and recycling, and water saving technology. So the three items is really related sa atong profession, no? Because efficiency will mean ang atong gipump nga tubig, ang atong gidistribute nga tubig should be very efficient so that supply and demand is actually allocated properly and walay wastage. The other one is kung nagamit na ang tubig, we have to reuse and recycle. So a lot of things are done now in terms of reuse and recycling of water. Part of that reuse is katong ingon nako ang rainwater catchment, and part of that reuse also katong gi-mention nako about sa household in terms of how you use water and how you will recycle water. And the other one is water saving technologies. So there are technologies now that actually recycle water in a way nga mabalik siya as dili potable but domestic water. So water saving technology will have some processes that will filter out katong mga hugaw so that at the end of the line katong reused water becomes again better water for domestic use, no? So that's water saving technologies. And then we go to the issues and challenges then of our water so that we can address water applications. So our water resource undergoes a lot of serious threats which are primarily related to human activities. So for example, one of that is climate change, you know, that's actually overarching is kind of mga flooding, etc. And because natay concern sa atong water cycle. The other one is sedimentation. Sedimentation is sa mga river na ay mga particles na over time na collect from eroded materials, and pag abot sa river na yung mga parts sa river nga maklog, no, and then water cannot flow properly. So that's sedimentation, and that's what happens with Cagayan de Oro River during Sendong. Over time na mga sediments. So karon nawala ng isa ka formation sa sediment which is Isla de Oro. So Isla de Oro is actually part of that sedimentation case. Then deforestation. Deforestation would mean kung gitangtang nimo tanan ang mga trees in the forest, when the forest is a reserve area for holding water and imo siyang gi-cut ang mga trees, tendency over time wala na ma-hold nga water sa underground para sa forest nimo. So mamatay ang tanan-tanom because when you have trees helps holds water in the infiltrated system sa soil and sa sublayers atong ground, and that will support actually groundwater nato nga storage. So deforestation is an issue when human activities kanang mag-land development, zoning of area for humans na wala na mabilin nga forest. The other one is water pollution, and that is related to contamination of our water. Water scarcity is related to water depletion, so makulangan tag tubig. Water conflict is maglalis or mag-away related to water source, and that leads to water conflict. And then landscape change. Any landscape change, kung i-change nato ang atong setting sa natural environment, landscape change will create problems with our water resource basin and reserve. And then of course, urban growth. The moment mag-extend ang usa ka land, urban sprawl, it would mean nga naay mga land area nga forest or reserves nga atong gina-change over time para lang mahatagan og shelter o zoning para sa tao nga namuyo sa isa ka area. And that creates problem kung dili nato lantawon nga sa future generation kailangan po sila og space para sila maka-create of protected areas for vegetations, land cover, water reserve, and basins. And the last item is excessive groundwater extraction and withdrawal. Extraction kay na mga subdivision nga walay tubig, kay elevated ra kay sila. So ang ilang gabuhaton kay mag-deep well sila. Sa deep well, they will pump water sa underground and pump water underground para masupplyan ilahang subdivision. So naday sila mga dagko kay nga tangke sa ilang subdivision para sa ilahang supply sa ilang community. And that is a problem when it dili ma-regulate sa government because groundwater is a resources of everyone. Sa fairness of everything, it should be nga ipananghid, i-control ang iyang water nga gi-extract, no? Dili pwede siya mag-independent para lang sa iyang kaugalingon real estate. So, before ginaalaw na siya kay gamay ra man tao sa Cagayan. So, kung naay mag-pump, magbomba og tubig, ginaalaw kay ang ilang mga area wala may tubig. Piki man sila magwag tubig. But now, kay dili na pwede, kay daghan naman tao sa Cagayan. And because daghan ang tao sa Cagayan, nakita na sa atong water district na siya mismo ang mag-manage sa tubig o mag-distribute. Therefore, anybody nga makit-an mag-pump and all, kailangan sila mananghid, otherwise ma-sheriff sila for using water without permission. So these are the right, you can see examples of problems and then issues when it comes to water, no? And how water is recharged in the environment. Okay, so when we go to water resource, we have to look at how our water in the earth looks like in terms of reserve, no? So by reserve, 97% of our water comes from the open sea. And only 22% ana is, sa atong 97%, 3% ana is fresh water, no? So, ang fresh water kanang mainom diretso kay sa dagat di man mainom. Ang fresh water nga 3% actually comes from the following, no? Ang pinakadako is frozen water, 77% from the glaciers sa North Pole, Antarctic, South Pole, and so forth. So, these are actually fresh water in sense. And then the other one is from the lakes, rivers, and stream, no? Okay, and then the last one, sa pinaka-fresh, is 22% from the groundwater. Now, nga nung dili man fresh water tanan river and streams, ma'am. Groundwater is fresh and pure water because it is infiltrated by the ground surface and therefore wala kay siya contamination. But ang open sea, lakes, and stream, naa siya degree of contamination by human activities. So sometimes, dili siya magamit directly, immediately as fresh water for human consumption. So, for example, sa Cagayan Water District, makuha mas tubig sa river, ang ilang buhaton muna is a filtration process muna nila ang tubig sa ilang facility before siya ihatod sa human consumption, no? Okay. So, if you look at on the right side, this is then the distribution of water based on kaninga idea. So water resource po nato gikan sa atong gi-discuss ganina where water comes from the ocean, glaciers, etc. A part of that is actually from the atmosphere as well. And that atmosphere creates the cycle. So ang mga cycles then goes up and down kay circular man ang motion niya. One unified cycle. So gingon ako ganina nga kung na mga surface moisture, surface runoff, it will come to be flowing towards the open water, maybe ocean, and water from the underground, kung sobra kaayo yung charge, then it will also exit to the open ocean, sometimes sa mga streams, lakes, and whatnot. And then of course, kana mga lakes nato, pag ma-evaporate siya, saka siya sa taas, becomes water, and goes back to the earth by rain, and then makolek na sad sa lake. Sa atong mga upper elevated areas, especially sa North Pole and sa Antarctic, ang naitabo is precipitation comes in the form ng solid, which is snow. So kung mag-snow siya, pag abot sa earth, may mo siyang ice, and then ma-contain siya, ma-retain siya sa earth because na may mga Alps, no? Or na ay mga glaciers or areas nga cold kaayo gid ka. and then dili diretso mag-melt ang imuhang snow. So this becomes reserved water na dayon. And of course, over time, kung maabot siya summer, naiuban-an sa summer, ma-melt, paingon sa mga lakes, uban sad sa lakes, matributary sa usa ka river, and ang river, magawa siya paingon sa open ocean. So that's the natural cycle of things, of course. Okay. Sa entire Earth, based on supply and resources, the Antarctic is actually the one that has more glaciers and permanent ice or permafrosted ice, no? Across the globe. And then groundwater across na pod sa entire globe, ang pinakadaghan og groundwater is actually Asia and Africa. Okay? Sa Africa nga lang, ilang groundwater dili-dali ma-extract because ang ilang environment kay dry land. Pero na portion sa Africa nga gwapo kayo og ilang climatic conditions, so ang ilang water dito is really enough para sa ilang community. And then mga wetland, lakes, reservoir, and so forth, and rivers are actually part of Asia, Europe. Kung tanaw nimo ang kadaghanon, still distributed across the globe, no? So therefore, if we look at the land mass by volume of water in terms of the area of the land, makaingon ta, these are the distributions of water resources atong supply based atong environment. But over time, let's say for example, if we talk about resource of fresh water, ang world water supply nga daghan kayo is accounted for by volume, no, cubic meter ang iyang kwan. Ang pinakadako is South America because they are sa tawag ang South America subtropical sa sila lagi subtropical sila nga environment, oceana. And then if you look at it sa Southeast Asia, gamay ra ang atong freshwater resource because at some point in time, ang atong consumption sa tubig sa South Asia with respect sa kadaghanon sa tao is ginagamit. So ang atong renewable freshwater resource usahay magamay, no? So that is an idea of supply based on demand. So kung tanaw po ka sa demand, as you increase the population over time, let's say from 2005, ang expectation sa projection is in 2030, a lot of people will need water. That's but correct because population will increase, therefore the consumption for needed water will also increase. So ang future freshwater needs nato na project po nila na in, let's say, in the data from 2010, natay distribution para gamiton sa agriculture, sa industry, municipal and domestic. So by 2030 as well, natay increase sa needed water based on the needed area, agriculture, industry, and municipal or domestic. But napod tay gitawag og shortfall. Shortfall meaning makulangan ta og tubig kung dili nato siya bantayan. Ang tubig ng atong fresh water. So, ang dinhi sa rightmost side, makita nimo, as population increase, then you have increasing water demand. It's more than double the population. Okay, so unsa ang mga water demand? Therefore, kay manaman ta sa supply, so let's look at demand and usage. So, demand and usage, kay mauhaw man gid ta, ang tao will need, ang human environment and the abiotic environment, which is actually built environments of human, will need water to a certain degree. It's related also to how we use our energy, no? Pariha siya og concept. So, kung ang energy sa tao is needed based on sa area ng application for energy and supply, same sa imuha karong water. Now, if you look at energy, some energy, for example, sa nuclear plant needs water. Sa coal mining, they also need water to wash the coal before it dry and then it consumed for coal burning. Ang mga biomass needs to be processed based on water. Okay. Ang gas power supply, labi na kung geothermal, na siya water. No? So, overarching, nagid na siya need yapon og water. Bisan pa, ang iyang end of the line is energy. So if you look at human side, sa human side of using water, so we have agricultural usage, municipal, and industrial. So industrial is mga planta, manufacturing processes. Sa municipal is ang isa ka syudad, isa ka area, na naay mga tao. Agricultural is mga crop crop production, and everything related to agriculture needs water. So, kung tanaw na to ang human need, no, recommended basic water for human need alone, kung di ta sa process mo tanaw, no, or sa energy requirement, kung di ta sa human, dako kay ang need of water every day. In fact, kita kung maligo, mag-CR, magamit sa toilet, manglimpyo, or maggamit sa pagluto, everything it's related to water. So therefore, we consume water as well. Okay. So overarching din ana water demand and usage is, for example, sa atong food production and supply. So kung kay ang tao mo kaon man siya, and then magkinahanglan siya tubig, at the same sa atong pag-process atong pagkaon, no? When we ang atong production for a product which is meat, beef, or nuts, or other items atong food, all of that sa process sa factory or sa manufacturing of food industry, what they have is actually the need for water as well para sa ilang process. So overarching ana kay dili lang consumption sa human for water alone, dili lang consumption para sa balay and domestic, but sa industrial, it's actually this one, no? Daho kay siya of usage in terms of volume of water. That's the reason sa mga planta, if they are, let's say, they will create a planta for something, let's say manufacturing of something, they will ask permission sa government in terms of asa sila magkuhag tubig and unsa kadako ng tubig nga i-demand sa atong community. So that ang government ma-aware kung asa siya makuha, and then nganong kuhaon siya, unsay purpose, and then unsa kadako iyahang i-consume against municipal and industry and agricultural. Kaya of course, ang industry isa ra man siya makagamit, ang isa ra man ka company, no? And ang iyang i-produce, but overarching is ang need para sa community and sa agriculture. Okay. So this is population demand and over time with respect to water withdrawal nga need. So these are expected projection based on Aquastat. Ako lang ni siya nakuha in 2015, no? Kaya the data that I have researched are all about 2015 lang yun, entire globe. So when the population will increase, this one based on millions, expected na ang water pod by volume in kilometers per year will also increase, no? And some of that is blue, which is agriculture related. Kasi after all, ang atong byproduct sa food is actually related to agriculture before siya ma-process. So it's related to food, which is needed by humans, followed by industrial withdrawal. They are the ones who do the product. So ang ilagid ang process lagi nila ni pag himo sa produkto ikan sa food. And then municipal withdrawal is needed para sa community, para sa domestic use at tao potable use. And then ang violet, mao na siyang ma-evaporate sa artificial lakes, no? Artificial lakes or mga ponds, no? And so overarching dayon, the population dinhi as you increase, then increase kod ihang need sa tanan usage of water. Okay. So unsa na karon nahitabo di ay in terms of withdrawal of supply. So ang nahitabo is we experience in some areas of the globe water scarcity. Water scarcity refers to the lack of water, and the other one is water stress. Water stress refers to the impact of high water usage, no? Taas nga withdrawal and consumption relative to its availability. When we say availability, akong i-mention is makabalik sa environment, sa natural cycles, sa ka region or area, ang iyang tubig. Now, that's not true over time because water is not equally distributed around the world. Sorry, this is around the world. Legit lang ha, around the world. Some places across the globe have abundance of water, but some places across the globe has also real shortage of water. So if you look at the color by ratio of withdrawals and supply, so extreme nga high is consumption, or maroon is extreme consumption, and some areas with low consumption. And so ma-compare nimo ni di karon kas asa man dapit ang area nga taas og consumption kaayo. Those are areas nga highly urbanized, areas nga flat ang terrain, areas nga daghan kay population sa tao, daghan kay industrial, manufacturing, daghan kaayo agriculture need to supply food for the people in that area. So that mao nang dako kay withdrawal. Ang mga areas nga yellow o low yellow are the areas nga mountainous region, areas nga nay mga snows nga where walay human habitation. Therefore, ang iyahang water is really recharged and actually na-store pud sa ubang areas because it's actually in a form of solid ice or glaciers. Okay, current population at risk based on the definition for stress, no? Stress withdrawal, extreme withdrawal of water. So current population ingon ta in 1980 comparison to 1925, and then expected nga water stress level from 1990 to 2025. So ang mga scenarios from the old is na project na sa PICAS, dapit sa right, when in terms of the expected situations when there are climate change and no climate change cases. So, ang we-expect is kung wala lang tay impact sa climate change, ang atong water, natural cycle pagyapon, pero kay nabay disruption sa human activity, not tay expected na climate change impact. So, naapoy water shortage and stress impact because some parts of the globe have more water, gaka-flood na gali. Some parts of the globe doesn't even have rain or water. Some parts of the globe experience El Nino. Some parts of the world do not experience El Nino, but rather El Nina. So, ano man na siya, ma'am? It's because this scenario here are impacts based sa atong human activities. Ang mga emissions and pollution na gihatod nato sa environment disrupts the natural cycle of our water. And then natural cycle of water na may mga forms, no? Ang isa na ka-form is acid rain, and then scarcity in some area, and over flooding in areas because of our climate change impact to the environment. So kani ang pollution levels na atong gihatod based on greenhouse gas creating pollution impact, which is climate change, and this one is related to katong wala pa'y climate change and karon nga naanay climate change. Okay. So what are then the efforts that we could do? So the first one is water conservation. So water conservation effort is a practice of using water efficiently to reduce unnecessary water usage. So usually when we talk about conservation, it is reduction of water loss or deduction in water loss. So magamay atong unmanaged water. But, and then, of course, ma-mitigate nato ang unnecessary wastage of water. So this is then a concept of sustainability, energy conservation or water conservation, and habitat conservation. Kaya ito ma-preserve ang mga areas where water can be retained. So, ako na lang din i-highlight ng nasa right, kay gamay man siya. So, in here, we have water conservation, which is related to better irrigation practices sa agriculture, use of saline water for irrigation. So, pasabot ani is we use ocean or seawater and then atong i-desalinate para siya magamit recycled water to our irrigated agriculture area for irrigation. The other one is propagation of dry garden. Dry garden is actually gardens which does not need so much water. Kaya ang water wala gibubo sa ibabaw, kundi agi sa pipeline sa ilalom para directed siya sa roots system sa plant para mag-grow ang plant diretso. And dili siya sa ibabaw para dili siya ma-undergo og evaporation and then ma-dry up lang, wala na nakuha ang nutrient o wala na inom sa plant ang ihang tubig kay na-evaporate siya diretso. So ang buhaton sa ubang countries para siya ma-lessen ang water wastage based on irrigation. So ang ilang buhaton is irrigate nila ang area sa ilalom na daan. There's also what we call as eco-lawns. Eco-lawns is mga garden nga ang ihang water nga gi-recycle from the household is used for the garden. Mulching is a gardening or how to say agriculture practice where sa ibabaw sa imong ground pagtanom nimo sa imong mga plants or seeds, butangan nimo siya mga organic materials such as kanang mga pulp gikan sa corn, pulp gikan sa rice, or mga debris gikan sa mga wood chips and all, para lang i-cover nimo ang ground so that dili gid kaayo siya mo init imong ground, and ang imong mga tanom dili dali mamatay tungod sa kainit. So mulching helps stabilize soil so that the plant can grow without so much evaporation of water when you water your agricultural area. Contour farming is an example sa Baguio where you create terrains from top to bottom elevation so that water can cascade from the top towards the bottom, especially kung ang imuhang farming is related to rice production, etc. Interlinking systems is systems wherein you connect water systems in a way nga connected siya, and in a way nga ang network is functional and efficient in terms of distribution so that walay leakage, walay ma-waste nga tubig. Okay? And then you have also recharge and soak pits. These are construction made sa mga countries like India. What they do is they have canals, they have they have atabay or wells, no? Soak pits. Soak pits means mga wells nila. And kana nga mga wells kay ilahang strategically gi-excavate sa mga areas nga na ay needed for agriculture and water use for sa community. But ilahang gi-make sure nga when they do these wells, this have recharge para ang ilang supply ma-maintain, dili mausik ang tubig sa ilang gi-extract. And of course, tree planting, no? When we plant trees, we reserve areas for water holding. Rainwater harvesting is sa mga balay when we harvest rainwater when there are precipitations during a given season in a year. Innovative surface water. Surface water is mga water sa mga artificial sense ni siya. An example is surface water from rainwater harvesting. So na kay mga ponds, artificial ponds, nga ang tubig niya is dili gikan gid sa ulan maybe, but sometimes gikan siya sa mga balay nga na-collect, and then gi-hold nimo siya para himuong ponds sa usa ka area. And natural ponds, ang mga natural environment of ponds will have its own system, nga natural system of diluting water and making it again fresh water. I'm sorry, not fresh water, but clean water in a sense. Tippy tap is really related to dispensing limited amount of water. Example na ko ani is sa mga toilet, na yung mga toilet closet karon nga ang iyang mechanism is dili full tank, half tank lang, or 3/4 para dili kayo pag-flush, kusog og consumption sa tubig. And the same na siya sa mga faucet nga dili full kaayo ang pag-bring mo sa tubig, dili full, kaya slow lang siya para dili kay daghan ang tubig nga ma-waste in one shot. And the same ni siya sa mga shower heads. Na yung mga shower heads karon sa atong CR, especially sa atong pag-construct sa building, no? Na yung mga shower heads nga micro iya magawas nga tubig so that gamay ra kaayo ang konsumo sa isa ka balay. And of course, renovation of the tradition of water bodies. Water bodies are open surfaces like rivers, streams, lakes, natural ponds, open sea, ocean, streams, and so forth. All of this is related to how we maintain water bodies and making some degree of innovation, or what we call as renovation, to traditional water body conservation efforts. Okay, so let's go to the other one na dahil kanina we discussed water conservation, how we can improve or use our water. The other one is water resource management. So water resource management is basically managing water distribution. So in terms of demand and supply, supply is related to our field sa water engineering. So usually we provide water for community. So kung community water na siya, we duha na siya ka form, domestic and potable water. Potable is mainom, domestic is para sa mga balay. And of course, we have also domestic water which will be used for manufacturing and agriculture. So that's part of our distribution for water. So how do we manage then? Manage it in such a way nga na-balance because kung nakay supply and then nakay demand, so i-balance nimo ang supply and demand. Dili kay magsalig ka nga daghan kay ang supply, so pwede ka mag-waste sa imong tubig because gamay ra ang nag-demand. It's not correct and it's not true. So water resource management is an integrated water management wherein we have 5 areas to look at for water management. First is water resource issue is being assessed. So kung natay water resource issue, kailangan nato siya i-manage. For example, kung ang atong water resource is the river, make sure nato nga natay river management. Kung naatang supply sa water nga fresh water nga ground, so atong i-resolve nga walay contamination sa atong fresh water and walay depletion because ang mga tao haphazard nga nagbangag para pumping of groundwater. So that should be addressed because water is a resource, no? It's a resource for everyone, not just for one individual. So water resource issue should be addressed. That's part of management. Second is water resource policy and strategy should be developed. So all water resources has to have certain degree of policy implication and strategies so that number one, ang supply and demand matabangan in terms of control, and then of course na yung mga strategy to conserve water, etc. And then at the same time, katong mga polluters o katong nag-waste of water, na pollute kay sila nag-contaminate sa water or sila ang polluter because sila ang nag-waste sa water kaya wala sila nag-conserve, they have to be penalized. So that's number 2. Number 3 is creating plan. Plan should be formulated for future generation. Dili lang karon, no? You have to have plan on sa ang imong buhaton in the future. Kay expected, ang tao dili man mugamay, mudaghan magid ang tao over time. And kung mudaghan ang tao over time, ang usa ka community mudako pud ang ihang supply need because daghan naman na siya i-demand. So, ang water resource management will require nga magplan ka para sa imuhang resource, supply, and demand. And then, we implement the plan. So, if in 10 years, mao ni atong plan for atong area, so atong i-implement itong mga plan, and then we construct maybe pipelines, we create storage systems, we create water treatment facility, we create facilities for wastewater. By the way, ang wastewater is water nga gikan sa mga planta, nga dili pwede ilabay dito sa suba, no? Those are to be treated sa planta alone. Sa municipal, kung natay taas kay nga waste sa atong municipal area, so ang Cagayan de Oro, for example, should have a water treatment facility for wastewater. So wastewater is katong mga excess gikan sa tanan nagyud nga water nga hugaw before siya ilabay sa suba, kailangan siya i-treat. So sa kampanya, it's a manufacturing process, so na sila ilang own treatment facility. They are required by law to have a treatment facility kay kampanya man sila. So all of this should be considered in the plan. And the last item is na ay monitoring and evaluation of the implementation. So mga agencies sa government are required to make reports kung saan nahitabo sa ilang community. For example, National Irrigation Authority will report to the government kung saan nahitabo sa agricultural water supply and demand. Kung mga industrial, naapod tayo DNR, na sila office nga nag-regulate sa water, so naapod sila i-report sa water supply and demand. Ang mga nagbaligya sa tubig, let's say City Water District, part na sa kanang business of selling water, no? And they are part of the government actually, but they are the one who disperse the water. So they also report the supply and demand requirements of the community in terms of domestic, municipal water needed. And then of course, mga companies, they have to report to certain agencies of the government in relation to water. So all of these are related to water resource management. Okay, so another one is enabling sustainable application is protection program na SAD. So kanina conservation, and then we have management. This one is related to protection program. So we have a protection phase na set up here. Kuha lang na ako ng idea. No? And the other one is assessment phase. So usually, when we have water, we look at, we characterize our water. For example, kung mag-inventaryo ta, asagikan atong tubig sa suba. So kung tanaw na to, usa niya klase nga tubig, that's characterization. So we look at then kung ang tubig sa suba is limpyo ba o hugaw. So kung hugaw siya, ato siyang iagi sa facility para treatment. Now, kung tanaw na to nga limpyo siya, then makaingon ta, pwede siya, pero, so, na ay connotation, pwede siya domestic, dili siya pwede diretso sa potable, kana mainom. So, iagi gyapon siya treatment. So, that's how we look at inventory of supply and characterization of water. So that ang katong atong supplyan, maprotektaan sila from any hazard and contamination of water nga mainom man nila or magamit para sa ilahang mga agricultural use, mamatay ilahang mga tanom or mamatay ilahang crops tungod sa hugaw nga tubig. So water has to be characterized and then over time tan-awon kung ang imong source will be viable for the use of the community. And then of course, the other part is kung nakabalo na ka sa imong water nga supply, tan-aw nimo ang action plan for strategies of the resources. So maybe short-term, long-term, medium-term application. So magplano din ka unsa imong buhaton sa imong tubig and how will you protect the resource of water. So that includes kung naay mga contamination and prevention for wastage of water. So sa engineering, usually atong gabuhaton kay ang mga CHE o ang mga kanang naa sa bayo, sila may mutanaw aning contamination and source of water. Dinhi sa atoa is we do the process, no? Maghimo tag mga pipeline, storage facility, treatment facility. So mga structures ni siya nga i-build over time para ang atong supply, atong resource can become supply for our demand of the community. So appeal na ang process kung naatay need to address like contamination of water, etc. And then of course, implementation of management measures is part of the planning process. So usually we look at kung asa ang source, delineate nato. So ubang area, kailangan ng bahinon ang tubig sa suba na ay para sa agriculture, so morning para sa agriculture. Kumpara ni siya sa mga municipal waste, morning para sa municipal. Kung morning gamiton para sa industrial, morning siya. So i-delineate niya daan, bahinon ang tubig based sa supply. Dili hugton, but may certain degree of storage. And then inventory, kung asa pa ang uban nga area nga naa siya and kung naa ba siya contamination or wala. So that way, ma-protect na dahil nato atong user sa tubig kung na siya contamination, ato siya daang i-resolve. And then i-determine ang susceptibility. So public system should be free from any contamination. So na yung mga uban area nga na cases nga nagdiarrhea, ngano man, is it the tubig? Pag abot ka di man tanang area sa Cagayan na ay nagdiarrhea. So that means it's only a portion of the area nga na ay diarrhea. So might be sa iyang pipeline system. So i-resolve na sa Department of Health and sa city water districts or the government kung anong na ay area nga na ay cases of diarrhea because maybe pagkaon or food poisoning, but maybe because ang tubig na ay contamination. This also a case sa uban country nga na ay contamination ka mamatay ilang mga crops or mamatay ilang mga animals, livestock because na ay contamination sa tubig. Especially kung mga areas agriculture nga magamit sila fertilizer na ilang supply sa water kay makontaminate. So dili day siya gikan sa ilang water district nga kung ano sayop, kundi ang sayop sa ilang pag-manage agriculture nila nga set up sa facility kay nakakontaminate sa water nga naa sa ilang area. And then of course, public engagement. So public engagement would be meaning to say kung ay mga issue nga kailangan i-resolve sa government in relation to public usage of water or mga threats in relation to water. So these are part of our assessment phase. So ang example na ko ani is last time na ay nagduol sa ERC, ingon sila nga mga mag-need sa inyong help kay ang among community, indigenous people, kailangan na mag-water supply para sa mga tao sa among sitio. So well and good, no? So sa first phase, gitanaw na mo asa gikan inyong tubig. limpyo ba na nga tubig? So na sila duha day ka option. As like fresh water, gikan daw sa underground nga tubod, and napod sila river do sa ilahang sitio. So that's the source. So kabalo man may daan nga ang open water source which is river na possible contamination. Pero ang groundwater tan-awon pud kung walay other toxins no kay basing groundwater siya pero high kayog isa ka metallic mineral. Kay metallic mineral is under the ground. We do not know if it's too high for water nga fresh nga mainom sa human. So you have to look at kay base na ay mga raw materials nga metallic ana. So that's checking. And then inventory is tan-awon unsay buhaton, especially kung nangutana ka sa ila para asa inyong tubig. Mingon sila nga para sa among domestic use sa balay ug sa among agriculture. So tan-awon gini mog ayo kung mainom ba, kung dili mainom, para asa lang siya, then unsay kailangan nga volume, etc. That's part of civil engineering. So and then the other one is ensuring the system nga imong gabuhaton is now related to that contamination. So sa among example is naghinumig tangke, duha ka buok from sa tubod. Ang tubod nila kay gi-check namo, gi-collect namo sa ilahang area, butang ang tank, and then ang tank fresh water. Gitan-aw din namo water quality based sa chemistry department and sa bio kung di ba siya contaminated water. Ang fresh water source sa tubod. Then katong sa river kay klaro man kaayo nga hassle kay siya i-filtration kay para naman sa mga animals o sa mga crops. So gitan-aw lang kung na high contamination nga hugaw nga makapatay sa ilang crops o sa ilang animals. So that in a way mo undergo gyapon sa treatment. Kung dili siya hugaw gyud, pwede ra day siya ibubo sa tanom sa ilang crops and then sa ilang animals. So that's how you look at susceptibility. And then of course, we ask everybody sa ilang uban nga barangay or sitio nga napabay ng kuhag tubig kay base daghan kay mo nag-extract og water na mas po na ang government sa ilang local agency nganong tanan na lang barangay og sitio nang kuhag tubig. So mananghid sa appropriate authorities about the usage of the water. Okay, so if that's done for assessment phase, you go dayon sa protection na sa mga phase. Sa protection is develop action plan, prioritizing specific activities para ma-protect ang water. Protect pod ba number 6 is based on drinking water by implementing protective action. And number 7, evaluate and update actions plan periodically. So na evaluation. So develop action plans is magplano. Let's say for example sa river, kay gamiton man nimo ang tubig sa river. So you make sure nga enough ang storage sa river. So walay mga hugaw gilabay sa basurahan paingon sa river. Walay mga other entity nga nag-distribute sa water kay otherwise daghan na mo nag-distribute sa water so walay mabilin sa river kung daghan na. So controlled ang system. Pinabanga but bahin-bahin pud siya. Pero mananghid sa government. Ang pag-protect po, labi na kung drinking water, is i-protect nga walay contamination. So naakay tangke, naakay system nga ma-purify, and every now and then, i-check yun ang tubig kung walay hugaw. Labi na kung potable water, no, para sa domestic use. So that's part of evaluation dayon siya sa process sa imong water system. Okay. So sa Cagayan de Oro, which is example nato sa Cagayan de Oro Water District Management, so ay manage sa tubig. And then ang management sa tubig sa Cagayan is actually regulated by a lot of entities no sa government. So starting from the NEDA, National Economic Development Authority, kung gamiton siya sa isa ka urban city, so mananghid sa NEDA nga naay project in relation to water supply para sa usa ka komunidad. And then ang water supply, muagi siya sa permission sa Department of Interior and Local Government because it's public use of water. Mananghid sa DPWH para ma-build ang structure para sa storage of water and facility for water. Mananghid sa Department of Health para ma-check ang quality sa tubig para sa human consumption, agriculture, and municipal application. And mananghid sa Department of Environment and Natural Resources, sorry, dili na siya DOH, but Department, DNR, Department of Natural Resources and Natural Environment, para mahatod para sa ilaha inform sila nga naamoy gigamit nga tubig gikan sa natural environment. And the DNR will always look at then ang inyong paggamit based sa Environmental Management Bureau o sa National Water Resource Board. Ang National Water Resource Board is the governing entity, no, nga mag-regulate o manage sa tanan resources of water sa entire Philippines. So, mga areas gikan sa syudad, province, region, municipality, city or barangay, tanan basta dako kay volume nga tubig kwaon mananghid gyud sa NWRB. And ang DNR will ang iyang Management Bureau to address how water is being managed, and sa DNR overarching as an office of the government that regulates natural water resources. And of course, maduta sa local government nato sa Cagayan, ang mayor mutabang sa programa sa tubig para sa iyang tao. So maghatag siya support and maghatag po siya policy and regulation in terms of how water should be used by the community. And before maabot sa water district, ang programa para sa patubig sa usa ka syudad, moagi siya sa LWUA, which is the Local Water Utilities Administration sa DPWH. So ang DP naman siya different areas of application. Isa ana is ang LOA na maghimo sa mga infrastructure para sa patubig sa usa ka syudad. Okay, so this is how water management is being done. Naay para sa structure or infrastructure, naay para sa governance and policy, naasad sa protection for the environment, and napoy protection para sa health and welfare sa mga tao na mogamit or sa ilahang pang-agriculture o pang-ilahang crop application. Okay. So, when you look at this, then, ang government nato with water district supporting the entirety, local o national, napo siya mga issues nga bantayan, no? Especially sa distribution of water, no? Dako kayang issue, distribution of pipe water that does not satisfy the standard for residual of what is this contamination index na may standard ang tubig. Kung inani kataas ang contamination niya, dili siya pwede ihatod as water for any application. Kaya delikado siya. So, poor water quality has to be controlled. Procurement of disinfectant is needed. And public hearing should be addressed in terms of complaints from residents kung agi problema sa health issue related to usage of water. So poor water distribution management and poor systems have to be addressed also because that's non-renewable water reduction. Ang mga waste nga tubig is non-renewable, di na mabalik, no? Unless ma-evaporate siya, di na mabalik. Pero ang mga waste, maadto lang sa canal or pipeline because na-leakage, wala nakitaan, that contributes to poor supply, no? So there should be a support system for that. So in the case of water district sa una, we were given the support by USAID, the foundation of Coca-Cola Company, and the own budget of kaugalingon budget sa atong water district to address the issue of poor pipelines and water distribution. Kay over time nagdaghan ang mga tao, ang mga pipe sa Cagayan karaan ang uban, so kailangan i-rehabilitate ang mga old pipes para ang system of networks can still be connected to new pipes, no? So that's the overhauling of system sa atong COWD para dili gyud maproblema sa distribution of water in terms of supply, di po maproblema in terms of contamination para sa distribution of water. Okay. So this is the profile of our COWD, current usage in Cagayan. Sa engineering side, basahon na lang ninyo. I'm sure familiar mo sa mga terminology. This is related to production and supply of water in terms of COWD operation. Okay. The other one application other than conservation, management, protection is water quality and balance. So, ang water quality sa usa ka community should be always updated and audited. Audit kung maayo pa ba ang tubig, wala bang problema sa tubig in terms of its application, in terms of supply. And then nabay mga action plan in terms of policy, management, conservation, and protection nga gibuhat para sa water. So this is related to auditing water quality. And then the other one is water balance, no? Water balance is ang atong DNR, atong mga profession nga related sa protection of water and the environment. Ilang ginatanaw ang estimation sa environment kung pila ang tubig nga gigamit against sa tubig sa atong natural environment, so that we will at least have a balance. So usually ang United Nations na siyang nga will look at global water balance, and then every country has to respond to that water balance, and they are also kanang how to say, pagbakahuman sila sa audit, they will report to the World Bank or to the UN unsa ang usage sa Philippine country in terms of water, unsa ang iyang gipanggamitan. So those things are related to water balance. So across the globe, when we use water, dili ingon nga kita tanan nagamit, wala tagi account no, napud tay accounting. And that accounting is based sa United Nations, sa World Bank, na nagtabang sa supply sa tubig based on infrastructure development, or maybe sa Asia, sa Asian Development Bank. And ang pinaka-support sa ubang countries na USAID, na GIZ, na mga institution, funding agencies across the globe nga gatabang para ang sustainable effort mahatod. Na may country good nga pobre, so wala sila infrastructure. Kung wala sila infrastructure, wala sila kwarta para ma-build ng infrastructure. So therefore, pahulmon sila sa World Bank, tabangan sila sa UN or sa Asian Development Bank and other agencies nga naay funding para sila matabangan sa ilahang. Okay. Sustainability application then, the first one that I could share, other than the fact na nag-mention nata sa uban, is sa engineering is water audit. So water audit is really engineering effort in terms of looking at how water is being used in terms of supply and demand. So kung ang atong eskwelahan is sa facility, no, sa atong mga buildings, sa mga usage of water, sa atong mga laboratory, classroom, sa mga tao nga gagamit sa atong facility, na I need sa water. So the system of audit is to look at asa gikan ang tubig, asa gi-distribute ang tubig, na testing and calibration of all the water meters, naman tay water meters no, magtan-aw siya pilay konsumo. And then sa water meters tan-awon kung nabay problema, and then tan-awon pud ang katong mga wala na appeal sa water meter nga measurement. So example ana mga atabay, di na siya supply sa gawas. So basin natay kaugalingon atabay. So for example sa Xavier University kung campus ta, naman tay gikan sa COWD nga tubig na putay kaugalingon nga tubig. And then ang water audit appeal sa iyang paglantaw ang konsumo sa tubig and kung naay problema sa mga leakage nga kailangan i-address sa pipeline sa usa ka facility. So for example, sa ARC karon na may project in relation to water supply audit, water audit sa atong campus, no? Ang atong campus kay lima naman siya. Kay ang elementary sa Makasadig wala naman. So ang elementary sa Uptown, Pueblo, High School, junior high and senior high, that's 3 campus. Atong Manresa and then atong main campus. So that's 5 campuses. So what we're doing now, especially sa ako sa ARC as part of the team, is that we look at pila ang tubig nga nakonsumo sa campus gikan sa COWD. Tapos gitan-aw dayon asa gipang distribute ang tubig, asa mga linya sa tubig, kisay gihatdan sa tubig, kada building, kada facility. And then gi-measure dayon kung pila ang nakuha nga tubig based sa metrohan sa tubig, water district nga metrohan. And then gitan-aw kung ang metrohan walay sayop, no? Dili daot iyang calibration sa meters, no, water meters. And then gitan-aw dayon pod kung kinsa ang dako kay konsumo o gamay kay konsumo over time. Maybe na ay building nga dako kay konsumo, no? Na apoy building nga gamay kay konsumo sa tubig. So those things are balanced out kung anong daghang konsumo or gamay nga konsumo. And then gitan-awon kung nabay sayop sa pag-calibrate sa meters kay basin ang metro mismo sayop siya, no? And then the other one is tan-awon to mga area nga wala na account nga tubig but kay dili siya gikan sa water district but part sa atong community. So example sa College of Engineering and College sa Faber Hall, ang atong atbang nga building, kanang duha ka building twin man na sila. So kanang duha ka twin building is an old building of the campus. Ang iyang water ana from the second floor until the last floor is actually groundwater extracted by the campus from the natural groundwater sa atong Cagayan de Oro. So, ang tubig danha nga duha ka building therefore will only be used for that building because sa una pa na siyang panahon, wala pay metrohan. So, ang naman tay laboratory facility sa engineering o sa CIT, so ang nahitabo kay nagakuha lang tubig sa ground. So, gitugutan sa COWD at that time. But now, kay dili naman pwede basta-basta na makuha tubig. So, ga-report ka sa COWD nga gamay na itong konsumo ana nga building, kay otherwise, i-penalize ta. So, consumption review is really related to auditing everything, no? Including, i-report nato sa atong management sa campus kung na ay mga daot nga pipeline, na daot nga meter, na ay mga daot or old na nga system or na ay contamination kay tayaon na ang mga linya sa tubig. So all of this sa civil works is that water system and supply, sa pipelines and networks, valves, faucet, orifice and all. Tanan na siya ng taon, including kanatong brown water or gray water na naa sa atong cistern sa soccer field, no? Underneath sa soccer field naman tay storage system sa water. And kana nga storage of system of water is gikan na sa mga buildings nga brown water, no? Sa nalang panglimpyo-limpyo. Atong gitipok kay di man na siya hugaw gid kay nga tubig, but rather pwede ibubo sa mga facility nato like the grass, the flowers, the trees in our environment sa facility. So that's our contribution in terms of conservation and recycling of water. So that's water audit. Another one is to look at adaptation measures. Usually, kung natang climate change, kabalot na daghan of risk, no? Daghan risk because nainahitabo sa environment due to climate change. And part ana is ang mga crisis related to tropical cyclone, typhoons, and whatnot, na ay El Nino, drought, na ay wildfire, sunog, na ay flood tungod sa extreme scenarios of the environment, ang severe nga storms or sa ubang countries winter storms. So those are weather-related disasters sa climate change. So because of this, ang impact is sa ato atanan sa urban environment. So we have to look at mitigation efforts para ang mga hazards due to climate change can be addressed. So isa na sa pag-address is to look at unsa nga atong susceptibility. So kanang Cagayan kay susceptible sa mga bagyo, wildfire, sunog, baha. So ato nang lantawon unsa din atong buhaton nga effort. So we look at the risk in terms of the hazard, kung ang risk is related sa adversarial hazard, natural hazard, or technological hazard. So tungod kay climate change man siya, so it's a natural hazard. So we do degree of adaptation. Ano degree of adaptation ta para maging resilient ang atong community? Resilient meaning maka-prepare ta to recover from any form of natural hazard based on climate change. So, application ana dayon is adaptation. So, adaptation is to look at then the entirety of what we can do so that ma-regulate, ma-mitigate, ma-reduce na to ang impact sa environmental hazard, especially sa water. So, we look at then hazard, risk assessment, and vulnerability para maklaro unsa atong mga risk. And then, tan-awon din nato asa ang atong areas nga kailangan ta mag-improve. For example, kay water man atong discussion, so we look at kung asa dapit ang too little water. So too little kay kulang tubig, kailangan improve, kailangan maging efficient ang supply and demand, kailangan mag-storage, o kailangan mangitag alternative water source. Kung gamay ra ang tubig. Kung daghan na pug kay ang tubig, so atong plantawon nga natay river flood protection, urban stormwater management, sa ubang country na sa glacial lake outburst prevention, wala man sa ato. So kana lang duha, river and urban stormwater management. Na kung naay pollution pud nga atong nakit-an nga problema, so adaptation is limit nutrient leakage, no? Butangan natong control system para ang pollution dili mahatod sa atong open water. Mitigate pollution at source, no, sa mga hospital, mga facility nga manufacturing, kailangan na sila water treatment facility before nila ilabay ilang tubig kaya ron dili mapiktahan ang community. Flood proofing for water quality. So flood proofing is for areas nga na ay possible flood, yatong i-make sure nga i-protect nato ang atong supply. Ang example ani sa water district no naman tay mga treatment tank sa dapit sa river. Nga kung mag-flood ang river, katong mga tangke ma-submerge to siya tungod sa baha. And possible ang iyang ilalo ma-contaminate sa river nga water. So to ensure nga wala dili na may tabo ang atong mga tangke sa water treatment facility from source sa river, atong i-elevate iyang mga tank, atong i-seal og tarong para kung na ma-flood ang river, accidentally mag-flood during a storm, dili masudlan og hugaw gikan sa gawas ang atong treated water para sa community. So that's flood proofing of water quality. And then, of course, the other one is improve na atong water treatment capacity. So, over time, kung kulang tag tubig because ang mga tao, didaghan, so magdugang taog treatment facility kung necessary para ma-provide ang tao og enough water para sa iyahang area. Okay, then of course, sea level rise. Ang problem sa climate change is musaka ang tubig sa mga open water source, dili lang river but at the same time atong open sea, Bacalar Bay and whatnot. So over time, we have to look at this and address this based on building infrastructure for open sea application, accommodation of flood management and storm management, etc. And for disaster, para ka Sir Dexter, mag-create of mga disaster preparedness program o plan para sa future generation and sa futures atong city. Maybe early warning device, maybe this disaster response system, or maybe mabutang og plan para unsa mga infrastructure para sa futures atong syudad. So that is integrated approaches to adaptation planning sa atong community. Okay, we can also use technology. So there are different types of adaptation of technology, no? Pwede capacity building, tudloan ang mga tao, management and planning, mag-assign tao mga leaders or mga planners and managers to look at things in better perspective. O mag-educate ta, mag-teach ta sa mga tao unsay maayo nga practices and behavior, that's technology adaptation. Mag-create tag policy, mag-inform, will build structures, will give warning systems, will give green infrastructures na eco ang application. We do budgeting and financing, and we use technology. So those are part of adaptation. So ang pinaka-importante nga atong lantawon karon is technology, dinhi nga part, no? So sa technology, pwede siya smart system. Smart system is gamiton ang electronics, Internet of Things, etc. para ang service nato efficient, no? So Internet of Things, gateway, pwede i-control nato ang sistema sa pagkuha sa tubig, ang sistema sa pag-store sa tubig, ang sistema sa pag-distribute sa tubig, paingon sa mga balay nga nanginhanglan sa tubig. So smart system is a system where we use technology to monitor each area and then in terms of supply and the process so that ang ihada distribution will also be smart in a sense as well. So efficient imuhang dahil distribution sa tubig. An example of this is when you have communities will have to need facility for water. So na ay mga Internet of Things that will be facilitated by technology, powered by technology as well, so that ang imuhang sistema is really very smart. So ang application layer is dinha mga computers, mechanical systems and facility interface sa computer para mahatod ang imuhang serve. Ang imong i-serve is ang imuhang middle IoT layer that will give information sa imong mga system sa tangke, electronic naman ni siya and mechanical. So machine or computer ang magpadagan sa tanan system. And then of course, kay ang imong system kay na may physical aspect. So ang physical aspect will have technology as well to help it run and function para siya ma-distribute sa community. Adaptation mechanism for other countries abroad, they use infrastructure, no? Kung na-baha, na-flood, this is an example nga gitawag og locks And this is barrier. No? This is in the Netherlands. Kung kusog kay ang tubig ikan sa dagat, mo backflow sa river, ginalak nila. Ang ilang barrier is a mura gate system nga mulak para ang tubig ikan sa dagat dili mo sulod sa river. And kani po siya sa open ocean, the same ni siya, murag inani, barrier gapon, mura siya lock system, but this is a lock ang tawag. So mura siya gate nga mo drop, no? From top, kung kulang og tubig, isaka niya ang iyang gate. Nya kung taas na kay ang tubig, i-drop niya ang gate para ma-lock niya siya nga system. And this one is flood barrier system. So some countries use the flood barrier like big, huge dike, no? Dikes are used to cover area for flood control, labi na sa open sea. So dili mo flood ang usa ka section sa isa ka community because gi-control na ang tubig daan. So these are dikes in the Netherlands, and ilang dikes sa ibabaw gali kay na din transportation. But napagyapon sila section of the dike which is protected because they put in place vegetative area. This one is levee nang gitawag nato sa para sa Cagayan de Oro. We have actually levees or embankment. That's actually murag canal nato ang atong river bank from the right and left side para dili siya mag-overflow at certain point in time kung na storm and then maka-impact dito sa mga nearby areas dapit sa river. The other one is discharge channels. So sa mga syudad, kung naikusog kay nga ulan, ang ilang tubig sa mga kanal mo katod og taas na flood water. So para maprotektahan ang community, usahay ang river kung taas kay siyang tubig o ang ilahang mga ilang urban water system discharge from the drainage taas. So na sila yung mga tangke underground, no? Storage tank, reservoir para dito ang excess tubig mo paingon. So ang excess din nga tubig ikan sa river o sa mga balay-balay mo paingon aning individual storage tank. And ang niyang purpose sa gid-ani is murag cistern, no? Pareha sa Savior, cistern para ang excess tubig ma-maintain underground and ma-extract for future purposes. Dayon, during flood times, dili siya maka-apekta sa community. So these are the tunnels underneath the cisterns, no? Yung pipelines. So kani mga river nga na tributary kung mag-flood ni siya, dili siya diretso sa mga balay mapaingon, no? Napaman siya dike. At the same time, ang iyang tubig sa ilalom na siya drainage facility paingon sa reservoir or discharge channel. The other one is artificial ponds. So artificial ponds is maghimo kag artificial area, open water surface para dito ma-collect imong excess water. An example ana is detention pond and retention pond. So gikan sa mga balay, kung nay tubig gikan sa ulan, ihatod nimo sa usa ka kanal, anang kanal mo paingon sa pond. So gitawag siya detention kay naman siya bangag and then ang tubig ginahinay mo saka and then sa ilalom na siya exit area, no? So hinay-hinay siya malabay dito sa suba. Kaya naaman kay embankment or dike. Nya ang retention is over time ibilin sa nimo siya, dili siya diretso mayabo sa kasuba or open water source because ay ra siya mo balhin dito, mo gawas kung maabot na iyang flood level kay mo man iyang open area nga pipe. Okay, dili siya direct sa ilalom kung dili diha sa open area. So, meaning to say nag-store kag yapog tubig, gina-maintain nimo nga kani nga area sa community na siya pond. And kana nga pond, magamit siya ang tubig. And then, ang excess ana mo'y malabay sa suba. So, unlike dinhi kay ma-detain lang siya for some time, na dili siya diretso moabot sa suba. Okay, so these are examples of that, retention and retention pond. So, retention pond, kung wala na tubig na, wala na, mao na lang ni siya, nahurot naman ang tubig. Pero ang retention pond kay, sahay magamit siya over time, so napay mabilin nga tubig. So, depende sa imong function sa detention and retention. Kung taas o lalom ang imong facility for of the pond. And then of course, urban drainage system. Adaptation in a way is part of the urban drainage system. Kaya kung sobra ra kay ang flood, tendency is tanan community maapektahan sa climate change impact of flooding. and makontaminate ang uban nato nga facility for water sa domestic use. So what we do is we place urban drainage system so that ang water madirect sa isa ka area, no? So it's either canal, or drainage. Okay, the other one is kung may impact sa flooding sa open water. So that's water control system na sad. So we have this coastal wave breaker, labi na mga tsunami. So we have coastal wave breaker para mabungkag ang usa ka wave formation. So this one is a recycled construction material. These are old timbers that are used as wave control systems. Okay, then sa adaptation pod para sa road, we have draining system. Now, these are not directed nga diretso moslod sa imong kanal or sa imong drainage, dinhi ang tubig, but rather hinahinay siya ma-filtrate sa ground. So, kabalo magita nga ang semento pavement is really not able to infiltrate water, kaya ra na i-drain. So, ang hitabo sa mga dala na siya draining area, no? Ang draining area is actually a vegetative area na mga trees or grass that will absorb the water. So na siya holding facility before siya maadto sa drainage para dili mag-overflow imong drainage. And then of course, infiltration drain system based on the roadway. So mga road or mga parking facilities sa urban area, di na sa gagamit og full concrete or full asphalt. They use this kind of material which will allow water to infiltrate on the ground. So these are permeable pavements application. So sa campus, natay daghan inaning application. Okay. So a new assignment therefore is to look at water engineering, climate adaptation measures, and mitigation measures and technology. So, sorry, ako sa na-use bro. Kaya na sa'yo, adaptation and technologies. So, you have videos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Kaninga 6 videos for you to watch. I hope you will enjoy it. Napamanwi time. You can look at this for 1 hour and then look at also the reading material for lesson 4 because that's your assignment for Tuesday, November 16. So November 16, you are to discuss the various adaptation measures for water resource, discuss the adaptation measures related to civil engineering application, and lastly, discuss which adaptation measures best apply for our Cagayan de Oro community. So sa imo lang tanaw ha, kay ang reading materials is about mitigation and adaptation man. So pag lantaw ninyo, tanawa dayon, unsa impossible nga buhat, gamiton ninyo for Cagayan. So you have 3 questions to discuss as a triad for next week, Tuesday. Okay ba?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Sige. So these are the references for the assignment, no? That's all related to water engineering. Sige. So I'll run through na lang the introduction to transport para dili at kahit na makurat next meeting. And this is the lesson for transportation engineering, sustainable urban applications code. Lesson 1 lang ko mag-run through, so I'll continue next meeting sa lesson 2. Okay, so this is now transportation engineering, climate change, adaptation, mitigation, and management measures na sad. So, ganina, last time we discussed about biotic, abiotic, and the built environment. So, sa atong biotic is the natural ecosystem, the abiotic is the lithosphere, hydrosphere, the biosphere, etc. And then we have people in the built environment, infrastructures, and facilities. Then we know that there's climate change impacts to our environment. We know the impacts relates to everything that is climate change. And then, of course, we are affected by these impacts, not just as humans, but also everything in the ecosystem, flora, fauna, etc. And then we know that the impact is also based on the contribution of human activities which adversely affects the environment, and that then results to climate change. So one example is the pollution that we created, that created adverse impact to our environment. Thus, we have climate change. And then we discussed that part of this is urbanization and population boom. And then now we have NOAA, the national project of the US, which is funded by the US rather, as a national climate assessment. So NOAA is an international engagement of the UN, and we are part, ERC actually has NOAA, kana inyong mga GIS application byproduct pa na sa NOAA nga project under Cancer Dexter before. So these are the different application of the project NOAA. It's related to global warming, the expected impacts of the environment and damages, especially sa atong infrastructure, kay civil man ta, water nato, and all people who are affected by the ecosystems, climate change, the ecosystems impact based on human activities and climate change. So I'll just have you to read this one. This is under Project NOAA. Okay, so our response then to climate change is sustainable effort. So that's the reason now we have sustainable development and the Brundtland Commission. And then our commitment to sustainable development in relation to climate change is really adaptation and mitigation initiatives. So in terms of motorization, kabalo man ta sa impact sa transportation. So ang topic man kay transportation car. So we know fully that mobile emissions are actually aggravating environmental pollution, especially sa mga exhaust sa atong engine, burning of fuels sa atong engine, etc. So ako na ni napakita last time, these are countries across the globe which has high motor vehicle production based on countries. So karon nag-start ta sa China, US, Japan, Germany, India, and so forth. So far, wala ang Philippines, which is good. But recipient ta sa mga gidebunk na mga vehicle from these developed countries, no? So, kanang atong mga second-hand cars are from these countries actually. So, kita ang recipient ana. So, that's, although dili kita nag-produce, kita ang part na apektahan sa ilahang production. Okay, so I've shown this before also, kung kinsa nga country across the globe or continent across the globe ang taas kayo karon og partly konsumo but partly also ownership sa car, no? So karon kay ang developing countries of Asia are becoming developed countries, developed and kanang kwartahan nga countries. What happens is that people buy cars kay ka-afford naman sila. So, and part of that is the country which is Japan, Korea, and China, which are part of Asia. And then we know that these transportation systems creates impact to the environment. So, dili lang pollution sa balay, which is actually area sources or manufacturing sa point sources, but also mobile, no? Sa atong sakyanan is mobile emission. We contribute to greenhouse gas primary pollutants, no? So this is mobile emissions, di atong impact sa environment kung transportation ang suyan. But we know that transportation is a facility where people use the facility for immediate need and lifeline of the communities. So immediate need para sa mga tao, sa disaster, agriculture, sa paginabuhi sa tao, logistics, pag-travel sa tao, para sa atong mga bata, no, na kinahanglan og road paingon sa ilang eskwelahan o mga workers paingon sa ilang opisina. So unsa din ang atong contribution sa transportation sector in terms of environmental urban development. So ang urban community like city needs transportation for access and mobility. And what are we using that for? So ang atong usage ana is support for the goods and product distribution and services, and as well as communication and people's need for movement. And unsa ang form, have air, land, and water. And then unsa ang mga subsequent categories. So physical ang infrastructure na category, maybe railway, roads, shipping lines, and airlines, no? And then of course, as we advance technology, ang ato lang problem ana kay advancing development is actually byproduct of population increase, which requires greater demand for mobility and access. And access requirement increases the need for supply, which is transportation. So kung ingon tag supply nga transportation, that would mean transportation facilities, that have to be advanced to become a transportation system. But then if you look at it in the entirety, kaning red is only saying something like this: transportation demand and supply is actually related to the economics of urban development. So, para mulambo ang usa ka syudad, develop, we need some economic activities based on human needs, and that human needs is supported by transportation systems. Okay, so the role of transportation in climate change, so you have the impacts, the contribution to climate change based sa atong mga activities and the impact. And the impact, balik ta sa Brundtland Commission, has to be addressed based on adaptation and mitigation initiative. So these are some of the mitigation adaptation measures based on transport. I hope ma-read ninyo. And then of course, if we look at solutions to adapt and manage global environmental changes based on this one, we have something like this. No, adaptation, as explained in definition, refers to initiatives and measures that measures the vulnerability of human and natural environment against actual and expected climate change impact. So in effect, as an effective response to climate change, we are required that in our applications sa transportation, we have to plan and consider adaptation measures and establish a process by which climate change impact can be integrated into the long-term transportation planning so that ma-prepare ta sa adaptation nato. And climate change adaptation for transportation system implies making systems safe, minimal interruptions and losses, and long-term para sa future generation. Should be balanced between technical adaptation options and their cost, kaya may kwarta involved, and then ang benefit sa community. So this is cost-benefit analysis dahil. So i-balance nato kay pwede ba ni, dagan man strategy, but of course, ano na to, pwede ba ni, pila ba ni, dayon masuportaan ba ni in terms of budget, kay kabalumanta nga ang benefit is for the community. Okay. So these are the issues of climate change, no, na tungod sa extreme nga temperature, ang mga dalan madaot, ang mga railway, malleable iyang rail, no. Dayon some areas across the globe kung winter iyang mga plane dili kalupad kay mag-ice diretso sa mga plane. Ay mga sakyanan mag-overheat. Dayon ka na mga bridges nga connectivity sa bridge na siya thermal sections, kani siya nga system madaot basta sobra ka overheat ang environment. And na mga dalan labi na asphalt mag-melt over time tungod sa kainit. Sa environment also we experience storms, no? When storms happens, maguba ang atong mga facility. Naay mga disruptions sa atong mga atong flight sa mga plane or seacraft, no, tungod sa grabe nga storms sa environment impacts. So these are part of the environmental impacts: flood, storms, and maguba ang mga structures and all. So kung mauni ang hazard based on the impact, sa civil engineering application, we have to ensure that our systems na sa transportation has to be addressed. And this is what is adaptation all about. Okay? So urban transport managers, kung kita'y mo tanaw ani, will have to have three criteria. First is meet the challenges of climate change in long-term and short-term scenario. Second is meet the challenges of transportation requirement. And then meet the mainstream adaptation in the existing transportation assets and planned investment. So unsay naa karon is our asset, and then we have to plan. Kung dili siya makasustain karon sa climate change, we have to improve it. So akong example ani last time katong bridge nga mabahaan, ato nang isaka ang elevation sa bridge. Kung maguba, to siyang usbon, gapuhon nato iyang structure para di siya maguba in the future. These are some of the adaptation measures. I'll discuss this last time in terms of application. Some of the adaptation is smart city component, no? Across the globe, we have gearing towards smart city. Nag-design ang city to be very smart in terms of climate change. And so part ng smart city components is the smart transportation system. Okay. So ang smart transportation system is part of smart city na siya criteria, especially sa iyang impact. Di ba? Ganina ang impact is pollution, emissions, and so forth. So these are part of that application na pwede na to lantawon parang engineering efforts makatabang sa adaptation measures sa climate change and sustainable urban development. These are part of that. Okay. So, sa Internet of Things po, pwede na ito lang taon kung pwede ba connected, cooperating, and automated ang atong mga system. Connected kay pwede ta technology ang gamiton, cooperating kay with technology, we involve everyone and everybody in the transport sector. Pwede private, public, and katong mga community nga active transport lang sila. Automated because pwede ta mag-robotics, pwede ta mag-Internet of Things, automated in the sense na naatay technology and computers to help us make robotic systems or automated systems. These are part of that example, no? Intelligent transportation systems. Kani siyang example kay mga Shinkansen for train and railways na paspas kayo mahatod og serbisyo. Hyperloop is mas paspas sa magnetic levitation nga electric trains. Then kani siya kay mga automated systems nga mga cars, dili na siya magbangga, and then aware siya nga naa siya abay nga cars and maka-communicate siya across each other, no? And then mga bus nga nanay internet information para sa mga bus riders. Napod siya ticketing system nga internet na kaayo, then napod siya electric iyang applications, and then na siya kaning safety promotion based on internet. This one is this is drone, no? Drone is kanang transport system para sa emergency and sa mga medical, especially karon sa COVID. This is water drones or aqua drones. Aqua drones will clean up rivers from all the debris and waste na gikan sa mga human activities. So these are systems that will transport these waste, collect and transport the waste in water, surface water network. Then this is hyperloop. This is magnetic levitation, electronic, electromagnetic, dynamic, and indo-track na system. And this another one is shared mobility. So para dili ta tanan magsakay, mag-share ta sa sakyanan. We can have it by car sharing, personal vehicle sharing, bike sharing, ride sharing, or demand ride service para ng mga Shopee, etc. So shared mobility is really all about carpooling, van pooling, and maybe casual carpool is kanang mag-share ka sa imong amigo or i-invite lang nimo, that's casual carpooling. Dili gid siya regular, usual, but special siya nga carpooling system. Okay, then so alternative to owning a car, kung dili tanan balay na ay car, pwede ra dayta mag-share, no? So kung natay gitawag nga bicycle, pwede ta mag-bike sharing. Kung naay short or long distance trip, pwede ta mag-ride hailing. Medium distance na trip, pwede ta mag-ride hailing. Ride hailing is magpara og sakyanan nga paingon at the same direction. So more siya mag-taxi, pero na ka share sa imong taxi. Long distance is really traveling and then sharing your key to the next person. No? Special ni siya nga car sharing. So these are the different companies now that are doing this effort to improve urban mobility based on sustainable application and car sharing application. And part of that is, of course, sa Internet of Things is na kay cellphone. You can communicate and ask, you can share and ask, you can share through phone and reserve. Those things related to mobility can be done by phone, including katong magpahatod kag service like delivery of goods, no, Shopee and whatnot, Grab or whatnot. These are related to Internet of Things. Okay, and then now we have this technology we call Car2Go. Car2Go is related to these things, pero kani siya kay sa international application ng example na pwede siya mag-car sharing, P2P car sharing, corporate car sharing, ride sharing, carpooling, and ride hailing. So depende on sa nga card ang imong gusto. Depende man pud sa imong application. Maybe
isa ka institution, isa ka company, isa ka group of organization that would apply for this, that pwede mo mag-own of car promoting these kinds of sustainable efforts. Okay. And then we have WinBus. WinBus is actually a bus system which utilize information and communication technology so that ma-reserve nimo imong seat sa bus. So this is more like sustainable effort because dili lang magtuyok ang bus no, na siya reservation so that kada lakaw sa bus puno iyahang capacity, and therefore sustainable iyahang pag-burn sa fuel over time with respect sa iyahang passenger nga nagamit sa iyang system. Muna ka ganin na example sa other parts of China, no, they are advancing katudayng kani siya nga pipe. Okay, so that is an example of this. And then muning mga naa sa Philippines karon, Uber, wala na tayo Uber ta, pero na Grab, Food Panda, Grab, Shopee karon, and then natay mga yellow cab taxi which is the Uber. Naday tay angkas na putol lang ang angkas tungod sa pandemic nga restrictions and protocol of physical distancing, so that's the reason niya na disrupt yang iyahang promotion sa angkas. But angkas was started in 2018 and then fully functional in 2019, na disrupt lang sa 2020, but hopefully mabalik lang ni siya. These are some priority, these are applications na pwede ninyo i-appeal for transportation sustainable application. Okay, so this is part of my presentation during the in 2018 when I was asked to present for a group of, government agencies across Visayas and Mindanao region, and akong topic is climate resilient transportation system. So these are two parts, for later pa naka-discuss ang second part. So di-run through lang ako para naka-initial lang ko sa inyo. And again, this is related to sustainable urban development application. Okay na ba? Tanan? Okay, sige. So it's 3:55. So I will cut off na my class. Nabay questions sa assignment?
Parehagya pa ng format, ma'am.
Yeah, parehagya po ng format. Maugya po ang link.
Sige, ma'am.
Ako man siguro gipakita na ganina, right? Sa inyong class. So this is the lesson 4. And then nag-advance ko gamay o initial discussion sa lesson 5. Because duha ra siya ka part, no? Part 1 and part 2. Pwede ako nabutang. Rename. Lesson 5. Okay. So, walay assignment sa lesson 5 for now. Just lesson 4, no? So, kindly take note of that. And hopefully, sa inyong hadinhing folder, morning output, morning folder para sa inyong results or assignments. Dar?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sige. So, hopefully, kada ninyo activity sa case study, butang ninyo sa inyong exercises. Tama na, di lang ko output dahil kilain ko yung tanaw ng output. So, nanalagdar ha, class exercises. Okay ra?
Sige.
Okay, sige. So, announcement, palihog kong sulod dar later, katong about sa group presentation nga order dar, nakalistahan.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, dayon. Kuan po dayon. Pa-appear na lang po ang katong, so, galito siya. Group and schedule nila, and then later PowerPoint, no, ipasubmit ilang PowerPoint, ilang assignments for ilang requirement for midterm, no, kay requirement man siya sa midterm na po. PowerPoint, handouts, and presentation slides.
Sa class exercises gyapon ni butang, ma'am, or
di ba ma-announce pa man kadar, mabutang sa academy para makahinumdum sila. And then sa class exercise, dili siya. Sige, pwede ra sa class exercise, pero ilang butangan og kanang presentation na folder. Let's say, kani na may case 1, case 2, presentation folder lang dayon. Butangan ha. New folder. AFT kay after midterms, no? AMT after midterms. Okay. So, example lang na siya dar ha. Group presentation after midterms. So, din isulod ang mga PowerPoint, handouts, and kinsang presenter. Okay. Salamat kay Dar. Stop na ang recording. Kung wala questions tanan, that will be all for the afternoon. Thank you kaayo sa inyong time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.